Vidyadan Foundation for Education, in collaboration with Society for Integrated Development of Himalayas, organized a seminar on Indian perspectives of education from 20th to 23rd September 2012.
Let me have a very good afternoon and pranams to all of you. I'd like to at the outset thank Shri Rinpoche ji and Teji ji and the other organizers for inviting me here. I feel extremely humbled. I am the principal of the Sri Aurobindo International School at Hyderabad. So I am used to talking to teachers and parents, but talking to such an august audience, seasoned speakers, I feel very humbled and a little bit nervous. So please bear with me because I'll be off and on reading Sri Aurobindo's and the Mother's quotation. This afternoon, I think three of us, myself, Monica and Pranjal, are going to present the vision of Sri Aurobindo's integral education in the form of its ideal as well as practice. I think since yesterday, all of us have been discussing about the crisis in life. We see a crisis all around us, whether in politics, economics, business, religion, society, family. It's a matter of concern for one and all. So also, there is a crisis in education. And all of us are very deeply concerned about how can the situation change for the better and what is the role of education here. I quote the Mother's words, "The conditions under which men live upon earth are the result of their state of consciousness. To seek to change the conditions without changing the consciousness is a vain chimera." One needs to first understand that the crisis that we are all part of is a crisis of consciousness, mainly because all of us are still very much in the state of the ego consciousness. We are identifying with our ego, which governs our actions, our feelings, as well as our thoughts. Hence the crisis. So what we are looking for is a change, is a shift, is a paradigm shift of, instead of connecting with our ego, what else do we connect with within ourselves? And how can education help in all this? What is the role of education in this process of change in consciousness? Sri Aurobindo has a quotation here. "Always she, that is India, has distinguished and cultivated in him, that is the human individual, a mental, an intellectual, an ethical, dynamic and practical, an aesthetic and hedonist, a vital and physical being. But all these have been seen as powers of a soul that manifests through them and grows with their growth." So the integral education, as envisaged by Sri Aurobindo and the Mother, is also known as the fivefold education, which consists of the development of the 5 aspects of the human individual, namely the physical, the vital consists of the aesthetic, the emotional and the character development. Third is the mental, the psychic and the spiritual. It is important to note that there are three things, again I am quoting, there are three things which have to be taken into account in a true and living education. This morning Mr. Alex was talking about that. That is the man, the individual in his commonness and in his uniqueness. Second, the nation or people. And third, universal humanity. So going back to these 5 aspects of educational development, we will take up that of the psychic being. As the concept of psychic being and psychic development is central to integral education. Now what is the psychic being? The mother says, the psychic is the spark of the divine fire which upholds the evolution of each individual upon earth. It is the soul consciousness that grows life after life, or rather that becomes more manifest through the instrumentation of mind, life and body, until all is ready for union with the divine. In other words, the soul needs to be experienced, the psychic being needs to be contacted, and in proportion to the individual's contact and connect and awareness of his or her psychic being, it expresses itself through mind, life and body. So the mind, life, body consists of the outer personality of an individual, and the psychic concerns itself with the inner psychological state of being within man. The true object of education then is the growth of the psychic being, which alone can make possible the shift of consciousness from that of the egoistic nature to the spiritual nature in man. As teachers and parents, our primary task is to nurture this spark of God, to create. How do we do this? By creating an atmosphere, an environment of love and freedom without imposition or worldly expectations. We need to enable the child to discover his or her inmost nature of truth, goodness and beauty, and encourage the child to express these through mind, life and body respectively. The mother has provided broad guidelines as how to develop the psychic being. Before I continue, of course, I would like to call the attention of one and all to share with you, and I'm sure many of you know about this, that what we are going to present today is just a tip of the iceberg of the ocean of wisdom that Sri Aurobindo has provided to the world. Out of his 35 volumes, I think we are just covering just a very small grain. And his vision is very deeply rooted in what we have been talking about as parampara. But he thrusts himself into a great future far ahead of the present. So many of the things that we talk about may appear to be impractical or not possible now. But we need to remember that it is the process which is important. It is the beginning, it is walking the journey which is important. So I may not be able to read everything that the mother or Sri Aurobindo have mentioned as guidelines in regard to the development of the physical, the vital, that is the emotional, and the aesthetic or the intellectual, and most importantly the psychic. She has written many letters to the teachers at the ashram school, which are all contained in volume 12 on education, and one of the volumes of, one of the books of her volumes. And she's given all the in great detail as how teachers need to conduct themselves, how they need to implement and practice the integral education. So I'm just bringing to the table a very brief outline of what the ideal is and how we can put it into practice. So the mother has provided broad guidelines as to how to develop the psychic being. Of course, she has not set any hard and fast rules, but encouraged spontaneity and genuineness, because whenever we are concerned with the inner being of a human individual, the expression, the practice has to be given great freedom, because that is the very nature of the divine self in us. The spiritual aspect, which is the fifth aspect of the fivefold education, is explained by the mother but is left aside for the present, as it concerns itself with the consciousness that is beyond the mind, and unless we are able to travel to that consciousness, it is difficult for us to think in terms of putting that into practice on a physical level. Let me again further read a quotation of what psychic education is about. With psychic education, we come to the true motive of existence, the purpose of life on earth, the discovery to which this life must lead, and the result of that discovery, the connection of the individual to his eternal principle. This is what the mother says. It is what Swami Vivekananda says, that everything that is excellent will come when this sleeping soul is aroused to self-conscious activity. As Sri Aurobindo puts it, the chief aim of education is to help the growing soul to draw out that in itself which is best and make it perfect for a noble use. Now, Sri Aurobindo has come up with what we call as the 3 educational principles of how to teach integral education. These 3 principles run as what I'm going to quote here. The first principle of true teaching is that nothing can be taught. The teacher is not an instructor or taskmaster. He is a helper and a guide. His business is to suggest and not to impose. He does not actually train the pupil's mind. He only shows him how to perfect his instruments of knowledge for himself. He does not call for the knowledge that is within. He only shows him where it lies and how it can be habituated to rise to the surface. Unquote. It is truly said that all knowledge is within. It needs to be unveiled and brought to the surface by the facilitator. Again, Swami Vivekananda's quotation, education is a manifestation of the perfection already in man. What is required of a teacher is to create learning experiences for the students and not to pour information into an empty bowl. All knowledge is within the soul. The psychic being always seeks truth and is open to knowledge from any source. The teacher needs to ignite and stimulate the interest and eagerness to love to learn. From training him in a various educational skills to developing his instruments of knowledge or mental faculties is the work of the facilitator. One of the etymological meanings of education itself is educe, which means to bring forth. Second principle. The second principle is that the mind has to be consulted in its growth. The idea of hammering the child into the shape desired by the parents or teacher is a barbarous and ignorant superstition. It is he himself who must be included to expand in accordance with his own nature. There can be no greater error than for the parents to arrange beforehand that his son shall develop particular qualities, capacities, ideas, virtues, or be prepared for a pre-arranged career. To force the nature to abandon his own dharma is to do it permanent harm, mutilate its growth and deface its perfection. Unquote. Every child, we need to remember, is born unique, and this must be respected and honored. To force or shape him into preconceived fixed grooves regarding his career only results in frustration and partial happiness. Therefore, the age-appropriate needs, interests, and aspirations of the child should be taken into consideration by every teacher and parent. The teacher, and especially the parent, need to be sympathetic psychologists who are sensitive to the child's inner and outer needs. Also, while teaching, different learning styles of students have to be taken into consideration, from the kinesthetic to the auditory or to the visual. The third principle. The third principle of education is to work from the near to the far, from that which is to that which shall be. The basis of a man's nature is almost always, in addition to his soul's past, his heredity, his surroundings, his nationality, his country, the soil from which he draws sustenance, the air which he breathes, the sights, sounds, habits to which he is accustomed. If anything has to be brought in from outside, it must be offered, not forced on the mind. A free and natural growth is the condition of genuine development. The past is our foundation, the present our material, the future our aim and summit. Each must have its due and natural place in a national system of education. Unquote. Knowledge is easily gathered when we impart what is familiar to the student and lead him from the known to the unknown, from the general to the particular, from the physical to the abstract. Importantly, learning should be rooted in local experience, extending itself to national culture and then to the international. This is how the sense of identity needs to evolve. Similarly, the individual's personal development happens from that of the physical to the emotional, to the rational, and then to the spiritual awareness and consciousness. So this perspective serves as the basis of the educational plan of action, which provides for holistic development and ensures the honing of skills and mental faculties for the child to do his or her best in the field of his or her choice. Coming to a very, very important aspect, that of the teachers, who are the real nodal point in any system of education. Obviously, I think all of us are aware, we have trained teachers, but trained more in terms of the pedagogy of teaching, but not necessarily being initiated into the different educational philosophies that we have been talking about. And it's very, very important that teachers constantly need to be undergoing a constant orientation. What are the attributes of an integral teacher, apart from being obviously proficient in her own subject? They are as following. Firstly, needs to understand the vision of the educational philosophy that they are connected to, or here that of the integral education. Second, be a reflective practitioner or a discerning psychologist. Have the sensitivity and the sensibility to connect with the needs of the children and try to understand what their needs are at different ages. Be a lifelong learner. Next, possess good character and inspire. One can say being a role model, but that may be a little too high, but at least be able to inspire the children into walking the path of spiritual development. And the final one is a catalyst of change. Be a catalyst of providing change in that particular situation. So child will be influenced or impacted in accordance with the personal and inner development or growth of the teacher. This is something we need to remember. So as I said, we have a treasure of guidelines of how to go about this for teachers in volume 12 of the mother's books. I would like to narrate an incident which happened in 1919, where I think what I'm trying to say is going to be further clarified. So this has happened to Mr. Major Ramchandra, who took a group of Boy Scouts, 40 Boy Scouts, to visit Sri Aurobindo. And they all went there, and Major Ramchandra asked several questions to Sri Aurobindo. And finally, he asked a very important question. How may I become a better teacher? Yes, I'd like to first share with all of you, which I'm sure many of you also know, that Sri Aurobindo himself was a teacher par excellence, and his students used to be extremely inspired, and they used to greatly respect and be very greatly influenced by him. So Major Ramchandra asked this question, how may I become a better teacher? And Sri Aurobindo very seriously replied, by helping the souls of your pupils to develop. So Major Ramchandra is very confused. He says, he asked Sri Aurobindo, I can help the minds of my pupils to develop, and I know how to help their emotions and their bodies to grow. But how can I know about their souls? And again Sri Aurobindo answered very seriously, you must first study your own soul. So as a teacher myself, and as one of the team here who is all very concerned about how things need to be put to practice, I think this would give us the right message. The message being that each one of us needs to take responsibility for personal growth. We may look for spiritual masters, spiritual leaders, or any other leader, but that is one of the problems I think we all face. The fact that we are looking for somebody, some context outside ourselves, and would like to lay all the responsibility on that one individual. But the important thing is for each one of us to walk the path. Each one of us to be able to take that responsibility of personal growth. Each one of us take up the responsibility of shifting from the consciousness of the ego to basing ourselves on the consciousness of the soul. Again, this may sound idealistic, impractical, but this is the only way, because we are talking of a process. A process towards a higher life, a process alone which can make the change of consciousness possible. And as I said, proportionately to the change in ourselves, as teachers, as parents, as adults, we impact the children. There are no shortcuts. There is no magic wand. There is no methodology. There is no package deal which, when applied to any school, anywhere, any student, is going to create this wonderful world of tomorrow. It needs to be practiced by each and every individual. So I'd like to stop here, and I'd like to also mention that Tejidi had told me, had informed me, instructed me that I need to talk about the challenges of what we are doing at Hyderabad. But I'd like first my two colleagues to speak, and then I'll be open to questions. And I'll be very glad to share what are the practices of integrated education at the Hyderabad school. In a very humble way, we are trying to put the integral education into practice. And I would also like to mention that, yes, the concern is the same, but the practices may vary. So even when we are talking of the ideals of Sri Aurobindo's vision of integral education, it can be practiced in our own unique way in different schools. But the principles, the ideology, the ideals remain the same. It cannot be replicated. It should not be replicated. So, once again, I thank Tejidi to have given me this wonderful opportunity to share the little knowledge that I have in regard to integral education. Thank you.